These cinnamon and sugar donuts are pillowy soft and they are so delicious. All right, let's get started. I'm gonna use my mixer. You can always mix the dough by hand, but we are mixing for about 5 to 8 minutes at a pretty high speed. At if you're using a mixer, it's gonna be setting 3. So if you're doing it by hand, it is gonna be a little bit of an arm workout, which there's nothing wrong with that. So let's start with adding all of our wet ingredients. I have my little cheat sheet to make sure I can read you off all the proper measurements on this. We're going to start with 8 tablespoons of melted butter. This is unsalted butter and it has been cooled a little bit. 1 1/3 cup of warm milk. You'll want to make sure that really the 2 warm ingredients, you have your butter and your milk, that is not over 110 degrees, otherwise it'll kill the yeast. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. You can always use a vanilla bean paste. I love vanilla bean paste for getting that extra flavor. I just don't have any on hand. And 2 eggs. So I'm gonna crack the eggs into a little bowl here because if you get any shells or anything like that, this is way easier to fish it out of than your mixing bowl. And this one may seem a little bit odd, but I always consider sugar is it's more of a wet ingredient because you're always adding it in. It seems like the steps of your wet ingredients. So we have 1/3 cup of granulated sugar. Now I'm just gonna break up the eggs just a little bit. To make these donuts really easy and to make them also rise a little bit quicker, I'm using a RapidRise instant yeast. So we're doing, let's see, one of these packets equates to 2 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast if you're using it from the jar, or depending on what country you're in, sometimes it's gonna come in a block. But we're gonna go ahead and just pour that in and just let that sit for just a minute, and then we're gonna add in all the dry. Now let's add 4 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And now 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. If you're using a stand mixer, you're gonna wanna make sure to use a dough hook. Don't use a whip or like a pastry mixer or anything like that, because that will break up the dough. We want it to be all combined together. So we're gonna do a dough hook setting 3. You'll be able to tell when the dough is done when it's pulling away from the sides of the bowl, and it's more like a dough shape. This dough is a little bit sticky, so we're just going to cover this up. Here's how I like to cover it up. I use a resealable top, and this is just one of the beeswax ones. I also just have like the replacement plastic ones. Those are really nice too. A towel, put it in an area that it's going to be less drafty. Depending on the temperature in the room, outside, everything like that will determine the rise time. Just expect right around 2 hours for that first rise. Here's the dough after it's risen. So as you can tell, we have a lot of plumpness in there, and we're gonna go ahead and roll this out. You'll want a clean work surface, add some all-purpose flour. This dough is a little bit stickier. It becomes less sticky after the first rise, but you do want a little bit extra flour just in case. Dust just a little bit on top. Your rolling pin, I like to roll it in, or dust it in a little bit of flour too. And then we're gonna gently roll the dough out. So we wanna roll it to right around 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. You don't wanna go too far with it. So I do like to have prepped a cookie sheet. You're probably gonna need 2, or a baking sheet, and then some parchment squares. So these are right around 4 to 5 inches square. And this is what we're gonna put the donuts on, so then you can easily slide it into the oil. For the size of the donuts, that is completely personal preference. So I like to use like a 3 or 4 inch ring for the outside, and then a 1 inch ring for the inside. But let's go ahead and get cutting. We're gonna go near that edge there, so then we can maximize as much as possible for getting the donuts. We don't wanna work the dough any more than we have to. And we're gonna save those centers to be the perfect little donut hole. Okay, so you're gonna take your donut, place it on the parchment sheet, and then place it on your cookie sheet and keep going. If you find that your cutter is sticking at any time, especially like the smaller one I find will stick, go ahead and just brush that in the all-purpose flour, and that's gonna prevent it from sticking. The dough is gonna make approximately 12 donuts, depending on the size cutter that you use. But yeah, right around 12 donuts is average. The nice part is that the second rise is a lot quicker than the first one, so you're gonna have fresh made donuts really quickly after this step. Now with the leftover dough, we want to prevent it from being worked too much and adding too much flour. So you can see that we already have flour in there from rolling it out once. So we're just going to clean a little bit of a surface and then just work it. It's a really fine line on working the dough. You want to make sure that you don't overwork it. So as soon as it's incorporated, step. And then before rolling it back out, go ahead and just set it there. Cover it with a towel for 10 minutes and then you can roll it back out. Now we want to cover the donuts and seal them up, so you can do this a couple different ways. I just have these bread bags that you just put it right in and you can seal it off by just folding it underneath, just like that. What you could also do is just put a tea towel over it and then set it aside. Again, you want to put it in a not drafty area, or you could also cover it with saran wrap. So we'll set these aside. We're heating up the oil to fry up our donuts. So you want the temperature to be at 350 degrees and to try to maintain that temp. What I like to use is vegetable oil. You could also use canola oil. And I have a skillet that's like 4 inches. It's kind of the mix between a skillet and a Dutch oven pan. I use this on the oven because it's my preferred method. You could always use like a deep fryer. You can see that the donuts have risen by 50%. They're nice and puffy. When you touch them, you can see it's bouncing back for the most part. That's exactly what we're looking for. So this is gonna go really quick. The key is to keep that temperature right around 350 degrees. Add 1 donut at a time, and then you don't wanna crowd the pan. So for example, I'm gonna do like 2 donuts in this size pan because they do get larger when you place them in the, when you're frying them. They're gonna be right around 90 seconds to 2 minutes per side. They're gonna be golden brown, and that's how you're gonna be able to tell. So you can see that the donuts are getting larger, they're going to expand, and then you'll be able to see shortly the edges are going to turn a golden brown, and that's when we're gonna flip. If the oil gets too cold, the donuts will actually absorb more oil and then become really oily and just not what you want in a donut. If it becomes too hot, the outside is gonna cook too quickly, the inside's gonna undercook, and it's just gonna be a crispy, oily mess, not recommended. So next to the donuts, you'll also wanna do either one of 2 things. You can either have, like, I like to line it with parchment paper, have a rack on top, or you could have a paper towel lined plate to place the donuts on to let them drain. Now on to our cinnamon and sugar glaze. So we are going to add 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon into a bowl, 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Mix that together. Now we can do this one of 2 different ways. So what I'm gonna do right now, because I've let the donuts cool just for a little bit, I've melted some butter. I'm gonna go ahead and quickly dip the donuts in the butter, and then I'm going to dip it in the cinnamon and sugar. If you just pulled the donuts off of, or I should say out of being fried, you can immediately put them in cinnamon and sugar, and then it's going to stick. They smell amazing. You guys, you have got to make these donuts. They're super easy to make. Everybody's gonna love them. Let's try it. Look at that. They are fluffy, they're soft and tender, a little bit crispy on the outside. That perfect balance of sweet and savory. It's everything that you want in a cinnamon and sugar donut.